I always had a bad feeling about it. My wife, Alice, had this friend, Sylvia, who was a walking disaster. Sylvia was constantly bouncing from one man to the next, and it seemed like every time I turned around, she and Alice were making plans to go out. It started with simple things, shopping trips, girls' nights, that kind of stuff. But as time went on, I could tell Sylvia was pulling Alice into her chaotic, drama-filled life. I voiced my concerns more times than I can count. Sylvia's bad news, I'd say, she's been divorced 4 times because she cheated on every single one of those guys. What makes you think she's not going to drag you into her mess? Alice would always brush me off. She's my best friend. I've known her since forever. She's not a bad person, she's just been unlucky in love. Unlucky in love? Please. The woman was a walking stereotype of someone who couldn't keep her legs closed. And I knew it was only a matter of time before her influence on Alice became too much. The signs were there. Alice started dressing differently, more provocatively, and began spending way too much time out with Sylvia, partying all hours of the night. I didn't need to be a detective to see that something was wrong. Still, I loved Alice. We had been together for 7 years, and despite her loyalty to Sylvia, I always thought our marriage was solid. Or at least, I convinced myself of that. But that night, everything changed. It was a Friday night. Alice had told me she and Sylvia were heading to some big party, and like always, I didn't like it. "Don't you think it's time to cut Sylvia loose?" I asked, barely hiding my frustration. "She's toxic, Alice. Every time you two go out, something sketchy happens." Alice rolled her eyes. "Stop being dramatic, Sam. We're just going to have a little fun. Nothing's going to happen. Relax." I wanted to believe her, but my gut was screaming at me that something wasn't right. I watched her get ready, her tight black dress clinging to every curve, makeup done to perfection, and that perfume she only wore when she was looking to turn heads. I asked her one last time to stay, but she just waved me off with a smirk. "Don't wait up," she said, grabbing her purse and heading out the door. That was the last time I saw her before everything fell apart. Hours later, my phone rang. It was past midnight, and I was already tense, wondering when Alice would come home. The name on the screen. Sylvia. I almost didn't answer, thinking it was some drunk call, but something inside me told me I needed to pick up. "Hey, Sam," Sylvia said, her voice slurred, clearly drunk or high. "Wanna see what your wife's up to?" "What the hell are you talking about?" I asked, my heart pounding. But before I could say more, the screen changed to a video call. And there she was, Alice, in bed with another man. They weren't just sleeping next to each other. They were in the middle of having sex, and Sylvia, that twisted bitch, was standing there, filming it like it was some kind of joke. I felt my stomach drop, my heart pounding in my ears. I couldn't look away, though. I was frozen, watching Alice betray me in real time. Oh my God, yes. I heard her scream through the phone, and that was the moment I hung up. I stood there, gripping my phone so hard I thought I'd crush it. I wanted to throw it, smash it, anything to erase what I'd just seen, but it was burned into my brain. Alice, the woman I thought I knew, was screwing some random guy while her so-called best friend filmed it like a trophy to show me. I couldn't believe it. That was the moment everything shattered. I was done. There was no coming back from this. I didn't even bother calling Alice after that. What was the point? I knew exactly where she was and what she was doing. Instead, I started packing. I grabbed whatever clothes I could fit in a duffel bag, some toiletries, and anything valuable that I didn't want to leave behind. By the time I had my things thrown together, it was close to 3 a.m., and I knew she'd be back soon. But I didn't care. I wasn't going to be there when she walked through that door. As I packed, my phone rang again. This time, it was Alice. I didn't answer. She called again. And again. I turned my phone off, knowing I didn't want to hear whatever bullshit excuse she'd come up with. I already knew her too well. She'd spin some story, blame Sylvia, claim it wasn't what it looked like. But I had seen everything I needed to see. I left the apartment, locking the door behind me like I was sealing off that part of my life. I didn't even know where I was going yet. I just drove, needing to get as far away from the betrayal, the lies, and the humiliation as possible. It wasn't until the next day that I decided to text her, mostly to let her know that I wasn't coming back and that I was done. No explanations, no long-winded arguments. Just, I saw what you did. We're done. Don't try to find me, then I blocked her number. The next few days were a blur. I cleaned out our joint bank accounts, took my name off the lease, and quit my job. I wasn't leaving anything behind that could tie me to the wreckage of our life. By the end of the week, I was already in another city, starting over. I even picked up a job in a new town, Castle Rock, Colorado. It was a fresh start, far away from the disaster Alice had made of our marriage. For a whole year, I didn't hear from her, and honestly, that was fine with me. I had met someone new, too, a woman named Beverly, who was smart, funny, and, most importantly, drama-free. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. I didn't have to worry about Sylvia's poison seeping into my life or Alice's lies hanging over my head like a dark cloud. Life was finally moving in the right direction. But then, just when I thought I had put it all behind me, Alice showed up at my door. The sound of the doorbell startled me, pulling me out of a peaceful moment with Beverly. I wasn't expecting anyone, especially not on a quiet Saturday afternoon. I walked to the door, and when I peeked through the peephole, my heart dropped. It was Alice. I hadn't seen her in over a year, and I hadn't planned on seeing her ever again. Part of me wanted to just ignore it, pretend she wasn't standing there on my doorstep, but I knew Alice. She wasn't the type to just walk away. If she'd tracked me down after all this time, it meant she wasn't going anywhere until she got whatever it was she wanted. I opened the door just enough to look at her. "What the hell do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked tired, desperate even. Her once polished, put-together appearance was gone. Her hair was messy, her clothes unkempt, and I could see the panic in her eyes. "Sam, I need to talk to you. Please." "About what? The fact that you destroyed our marriage? Or how you decided to sleep with another man while your trashy friend filmed it for kicks?" She winced at my words but didn't back down. "It's not what you think, Sam. I swear, I didn't do it willingly. I was drugged." I couldn't help but laugh, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of bitter laugh that comes from disbelief and anger. "You've got to be kidding me, Alice. Drugged? That's the best you could come up with after a year of silence?" She stepped closer, her voice rising in desperation. "I'm telling the truth. Sylvia, she set me up. I didn't know what was happening. I thought I was just going to the party, but then everything got blurry, and the next thing I knew, I was waking up with strange men. I didn't cheat on you. They raped me." I stood there, stunned. For a brief moment, I hesitated. Could it be true? Could everything I believed about that night have been a lie? But then I remembered all the warnings I had given her, all the times I begged her to cut Sylvia out of her life, and all the chances she had to avoid this mess. "Even if you were drugged, Alice, you put yourself in that situation," I said, my voice hard. "I told you what would happen if you kept hanging out with Sylvia. I told you she'd pull you into her twisted world. You didn't listen, and now you're here, trying to rewrite history." Alice's eyes filled with tears, and her voice cracked. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I was scared. I've spent the past year trying to put the pieces of my life back together, trying to find you. I've filed lawsuits against those men, I've gone to therapy, I've done everything I could to make this right. I shook my head. Make this right? You can't make this right, Alice. You made your choice the night you walked out that door and into Sylvia's world. And now you're dealing with the consequences. Alice fell silent for a moment, and I could see the realization sinking in. She knew she had lost me long before she ever rang my doorbell. But then, in typical Alice fashion, she tried one last desperate move. Sam, please, she whispered, I'll fight for you. I still love you. We can fix this. I sighed, exhaustion washing over me. I was done. Alice, there's nothing to fix. I've moved on. We're done. Let's just get this over with and file for divorce. I'm not giving you a divorce, she spat back, her voice suddenly shifting to that familiar defensive tone. You're still my husband, and I'm not letting you go that easily. It was like a switch flipped. The sweet, apologetic Alice was gone, replaced by the woman who always needed to be in control, always needed to win. But it didn't matter anymore. I had nothing left to say. Just as Alice was gearing up for another round of hysterics, Beverly walked into the room. She smiled at Alice, oblivious to the tension, and said, Hey, nice to meet you. I'm just going to change for dinner. She disappeared down the hallway, completely unfazed, as if this situation was perfectly normal. Alice's eyes widened in disbelief. Who the hell is that? She demanded. That's Beverly, I said calmly. We've been together for a while now. She knows about you, and she knows I've moved on. I suggest you do the same. Alice looked like she'd been slapped. For a moment, I thought she might throw something or scream, but instead, she just stood there, stunned. Then, with a shaky breath, she turned toward the door. This isn't over, Sam, she said quietly. I'll fight for you. Good luck with that, I replied, my voice tired. I'm filing for divorce, Alice. This is over. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her, and for the first time in a long while, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. In the days that followed, I half expected Alice to make good on her promise to fight for me. After all, that was her nature, she never liked to lose, even when it was painfully obvious that the game was over. But the more time passed, the more I realized that her threats were just hollow words, the last desperate gasp of someone who had already lost everything. I filed for divorce the very next week. I wanted this chapter of my life officially closed, locked up, and buried. When Alice finally responded, she was still combative, claiming she wouldn't agree to the divorce, that I had abandoned her, and that she wasn't giving up without a fight. She had even filed a counterclaim, accusing me of abandonment, trying to make it seem like I had left her with no explanation. But I had all the receipts. I kept every text, every piece of communication that showed her lies for what they were. My lawyer assured me it would be a straightforward case. The evidence was stacked in my favor, and deep down, I think Alice knew she had no real chance. Still, she dragged it out. Months went by with back-and-forth arguments, lawyers involved, her making wild claims about how she had been wronged and how the whole situation wasn't her fault. At one point, she even tried to make it sound like I was the one who had driven her into Sylvia's arms, that my refusal to accept her friendship with Sylvia had somehow pushed her into that mess. It was always the same story with her, never her fault, always the victim. But eventually, even Alice gave in. I think it was the realization that I wasn't budging, that no amount of drama or manipulation was going to change my mind. She finally agreed to settle. The divorce was finalized after a few more months of paperwork and tedious court appearances. And just like that, Alice was officially out of my life. During those months, Beverly stood by me without hesitation. She wasn't some passive observer in the mess, she knew what was happening and gave me the space to deal with it. But at the same time, she made it clear that she was here for the long haul. Beverly was different from Alice in every way. There was no manipulation, no drama, just a calm, steady support system that I didn't even know I needed. The final divorce hearing came and went without any surprises. Alice looked defeated as the judge declared our marriage dissolved. There were no tears, no big blowout arguments, just the cold finality of it all. When the papers were signed, I felt this immense weight lift off my shoulders. It was like I had been carrying around this heavy burden for so long, and now it was finally gone. The funny thing was, when it was all said and done, I didn't feel anger toward Alice anymore. I wasn't even sad. I just felt nothing. It was over, and I had no desire to look back. A few weeks later, I got a random message from Alice, something about how she hoped I was doing well, how she had found peace after everything. I never replied. I didn't need to. Whatever peace she had found, it wasn't my concern anymore. Beverly and I continued our life together, and things were simple. There were no games, no mind tricks, no baggage. Just us, living a drama-free existence. And for the first time in a long time, I realized that's all I ever really wanted. Looking back, I've thought a lot about what happened with Alice. It's strange how life can take you down roads you never expected, and how the people you think you know the best can turn out to be complete strangers. When I first married Alice, I had no doubt in my mind that we'd be together forever. We had built a life, or so I thought, that was solid, until it wasn't. The truth is, Alice was always chasing something I could never give her. Maybe it was excitement, maybe it was validation from people like Sylvia, or maybe it was just that she never knew who she really was. I don't know, and frankly, I don't care anymore. What I've learned is that you can't fix someone who doesn't want to be fixed. You can't save someone from the choices they willingly make. And you certainly can't build a future with someone who is more interested in living in a world of lies than in a reality with you. The moment I saw that video, everything I'd feared became real. I knew then that our marriage had never been as strong as I thought. Alice's betrayal didn't just happen that night, it had been building for years. She had chosen her path long before Sylvia's influence came into play. The lies, the manipulation, the constant prioritization of her friendship with someone I knew was toxic, it all led to that final blow. I went through all the stages you'd expect: anger, sadness, confusion. I replayed every moment in my head, wondering if there was something I could have done to prevent it. But I came to realize that none of that mattered. Alice's choices were her own. No amount of pleading, reasoning, or love could have stopped her from walking out that door and into Sylvia's world. When she showed up at my door a year later, spinning that wild story about being drugged and raped, I was momentarily shaken. I didn't want to believe that someone I had once loved could lie so blatantly, but that was Alice. Even when she was caught red-handed, she was a master of twisting the narrative. The worst part? I think she actually believed her own lies by the end of it. That's the scary thing about people like Alice, they convince themselves they're the victim, no matter what they've done. But I had moved on. I had built a new life for myself, one that didn't involve the endless cycle of drama and deceit. Beverly was a breath of fresh air, and with her, I rediscovered what it felt like to be with someone who respected me, who didn't constantly test the limits of my trust. With Beverly, there were no games, no manipulation, just honesty and a genuine desire to build something real. In the end, I learned that sometimes, walking away is the only choice. Sometimes, no matter how much history you have with someone, you have to recognize when the damage is too deep, when the person standing in front of you isn't who you thought they were. Divorce wasn't something I ever imagined for myself, but it was necessary. It allowed me to let go of the anger, the hurt, and the betrayal and focus on my own happiness. So, if there's one piece of advice I could give to anyone who finds themselves in a similar situation, it's this: trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't ignore the red flags, don't brush off your instincts. And most importantly, know your worth. You don't have to settle for someone who doesn't respect you or your relationship. You deserve better. As for Alice, I don't know where she is or what she's doing now, and honestly, I don't care. I hope she's found whatever it was she was looking for, but that's no longer my concern. I've built a new life, one free from her lies, and I'm happier than I've ever been. Some people aren't meant to stay in your life forever. Sometimes, they're just a lesson in what you need to avoid. And for me, Alice was that lesson, a hard, painful one, but one I'm grateful for in the end.
Dear listeners, thank you for your incredible support and for tuning into my stories on YouTube. Your enthusiasm and feedback mean the world to me. Stay tuned for more exciting tales. Warm regards.